this is IEEE UCF YouTube. Today, I'm going to show you a little bit about the soldering process. Now, the first thing that we want to take a look at is our equipment. We have here a soldering station complete with a soldering iron, and we want to make sure that this is plugged into the wall before we start. This right here is your soldering iron. Be very careful with it. Anything that is metal you don't want to touch because it's going to be very hot. Ooh, that is hot. And now, let's take a look. You can adjust the heat right here with this knob. A lot of soldering stations have this, but some don't. The hotter it is, the easier you'll be able to melt your solder. This right here is the solder itself. It's very thin wire metal, and it melts very easily when you touch it to the tip of your soldering iron. The last component of this soldering station is our sponge here. Right now the sponge is dry, but when it's wet, it's perfect for cleaning off residue on the soldering iron. So let's go ahead and get that wet. And just like that, now we have a sponge that is perfect for cleaning our soldering iron. You want to be constantly cleaning it as you're going. For our next piece of equipment, let's talk about these. These are helping hands, and they are extremely useful when you're soldering small components together. For example, take this wire. When we put this wire in the helping hand, now we don't have to hold it while we're soldering. Let's talk about safety real quick. These are some of the PPE that you need to wear. Most importantly, you need to be wearing your safety glasses. The fumes from solder can get into your eyes. And always, just in a lab, you want to be wearing your safety glasses. A mask is useful for keeping the solder smoke out of your mouth and nose. And your gloves are also nice if you want to keep your hands protected. The gloves and the mask aren't really necessary, but the safety glasses are a must. Now, let's take a look at our components. This right here is a circuit board. This is mostly what you're going to be soldering on. It has 16 through holes right here. They're called through holes because you can stick lots of components directly through them. For example, we're going to be putting on these header pins. You can see the header pins just stick right through there. And what we're going to do, once they're mounted inside the circuit board, we're just going to solder each one of these pins onto the through holes. Now that they're in there, here's how we're going to do it. We take the soldering iron, we place it directly onto the through hole that we're going to solder to, and then once that's heated up, we're going to very slowly, very gently push the solder into the iron. Now, it'll take a minute for the solder to heat up, but once it does, it will melt directly onto whatever it's touching. That's why we want to get the solder directly onto the iron so that it'll heat up, and then we can use the soldering iron to sort of spread it around the through hole so that we get a nice, clean connection between the pins and the through holes. Now, after all that soldering is done, here's your finished product. You should be able to see a nice, clean connection between each pin and each through hole. They'll be glued together with the solder, and the pins won't be able to move at all. Next up, let's talk about some other components that you can solder besides circuit boards. These right here are resistors. You can use lots of different things for this. Resistors, diodes, you name it. Now, these resistors, we're going to get real close to each other, and then we're just going to solder them directly together so that they become one resistor with the resistances added together. Now, it'll take a minute to finagle your way into having these two in the directly correct position, but once you have them, they'll be just barely touching each other, right next to each other, almost like parallel lines, and now you're going to put your solder on there just directly onto where the two resistors are touching, going to try to heat the resistors up with your soldering iron, and then slowly drop your solder onto the resistors and spread around the solder onto the resistors. And there you have it, one super resistor. Next up, let's talk about the process of tinning. When you get a pre-made wire, you'll see that it's very nice and clean at the end. It has this very straight line so you can stick it directly into a breadboard. But if you cut a wire yourself, it'll be frayed at the ends, and you don't want that at all. So what you want to do is the process of tinning involves twisting the wire so that it is nice and straight like this, but it'll come undone eventually. So what we do is we tin the wire, meaning we put a little drop of solder onto it, and we spread it around to keep the connection straight and not fraying at all. And then once it's on there, we're going to spread it around the wire until it's nice and evenly coated. And you can stick that directly into your breadboard.